will be a year of record consumption of fossil fuels. We can con ourselves as much as we like. There'll be more coal burnt this year than has ever been burnt in the history of mankind. And the same applies to the use of gas and oil. Even the most ardent proponent of net zero has to accept the world will still be using oil and gas up until 2050 and beyond. And yet we've decided to sacrifice this industry as a consensus around net zero has emerged. Of course, I say net zero, it isn't really net zero. All we're doing is exporting carbon dioxide production. And into the bargain, we are seeing Scotland and many parts of England and Wales literally deindustrialising before our very eyes. Yes, there are arguments around new industries, but for every job created in a new industry, many more have been lost in conventional industries. We now have the most expensive energy prices, commercial energy prices in the world, and the whole thing is complete and utter madness. Richard, Tice and I have been standing up and fighting and speaking on these issues for many, many years. It's also worth adding, shortly after the Prime Minister's so-called EU reset, that if we look across the other side of the North Sea to Norway, not only do we see a country that has championed its oil and gas industry, a country that sells an awful lot of gas to us, a country that also has a 200-mile exclusive economic zone for fisheries. A 200-mile EEZ. Just imagine what anything like that would do for all these towns and cities on the east coast of Scotland. So whichever way we look, we're getting things wrong. They must be laughing themselves silly in Norway that now actually we have to import a significant amount of our electricity from them as well. It is almost, the madness of this is almost completely and utterly beyond belief. One of the reasons that we've been doing well in Scotland is we've been attracting some very, very good, fresh talent. There have been several Conservative councillors that have come to us, and there'll be a Labour councillor coming to us this afternoon when we get to Hamilton. But Duncan Massey has been not just a city councillor here in Aberdeen over the course of the last few years, but somebody who has spent 20 years working in the oil and gas industry, and it's my happy duty to welcome Duncan as a Reform councillor here in the city of Aberdeen today. Duncan, thank you very much.
Well, thanks, Nigel. Thanks, everyone. It's great to be here. Didn't think it would be quite such a big show today with just me joining as a Reform councillor, but obviously my reputation precedes me. So thanks for that. You know, I've joined Reform. I think, like for most people, you know, real concern about the country, the whole country. You know, doesn't feel like it's working. We have a stagnant economy, stagnant wages. As Nigel said, we're deindustrialising pretty rapidly because of net zero. We can't control borders. We can't build things like energy infrastructure or houses or public services. Don't feel like they're working. We've got huge problems and we need massive and urgent change. And I believe that it's only the Reform Party that can bring that change. And I think obviously we've got similar issues across the whole of the UK, but I think in Scotland, you know, we seem to be failing further and faster with an incompetent and devoid of ideas SNP, a sort of entrenched and entitled SNP who've been in power for nearly 20 years, have done nothing but fail, but seem more concerned with the gravy train continuing rather than trying to improve things. And again, I think it's only Reform that can change this dynamic and move Scotland to a place where we can change policies. And obviously, the main reason here in Aberdeen is the impact on the oil and gas industry of Labour and SNP policies. You know, it just feels like deliberate destruction of our industry at the moment. 78% tax, no new licences, large projects caught up in a regulatory limbo. And all at the same time, all Labour and SNP have is gaslighting us with fairy tales about the so-called just transition. You know, as Nigel said, we've got low oil prices now. you know, it feels like it's going to be a bit of a perfect storm. We've seen some redundancies at Harbour. I think it might be a very painful time for the city. And frankly, I don't think most Aberdonians have yet woken up to just how badly we're being treated. And again, I think it's only reform, by supporting reform, that we're going to get the changes to our energy policies that we need. So that's my reasons for being here. Delighted to be here and look forward to increasing the reform vote in Aberdeen.
Now, it's exactly 365 days ago tomorrow that I decided to come out of political retirement and throw myself back into the fray. And in the aftermath of the general election, I had one big political target, which was the English County Council elections. I wasn't very happy that in 9 of our strongest counties the elections were cancelled, but we carried on in what on paper were our weaker areas and achieved a great success on the 1st of May. But carrying the torch for the party here in Scotland over the course of the last year, repeatedly visiting and encouraging and helping these branches to set up and defectors to come across, has been my deputy leader, Richard Tice, somebody who also has spoken out for many, many years on the madness of our net zero policies. Richard.
Good morning. Thank you, Nigel. It's great to have everybody here. It's great to be here in Aberdeen, one of the global centres of energy expertise. And it's no coincidence that when the UK economy was growing every year at 2.5 to 3.5% in the 80s and 90s, yes, we were extracting significant quantities of oil and gas, and Aberdeen and Scotland was doing very well. And it's an absolute tragedy that this energy treasure is essentially being left in the sea, or indeed under our feet on land, because it is a huge, huge opportunity. And the other tragedy, I've just come back from the Middle East, where they are extracting oil and gas as fast as they can go. And guess what? It's making them very wealthy. And we know that oil and gas is a proven winner. It's a proven winner here in Aberdeen, and it's been a proven winner for Scotland. And that's why I think the simple slogan that I coined, "Drill Scotland, drill." You know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. We know it works, and we should be accelerating it. I'm perhaps a little less polite than Nigel. I now call it net stupid zero. I think it's the greatest act of financial self-harm ever imposed on this nation by people in Westminster. And it's not them that suffer. It's ordinary men and women, families and children that suffer in our communities. And that's why we are battling so hard to turn this around. And we're very clear. Our ambition is to win the next general election. And we are polling, almost every poll now, we're polling ahead by 8, 9, 10 points. And here's the thing. If we scrap net zero, and that is our plan, then that is a great opportunity for the oil and gas industry that wants a welcoming government that creates a stable tax environment, a stable regulatory environment, and recognises the huge value that can be extracted from oil and gas. It is still hundreds and hundreds of billions of pounds in oil and gas offshore. There's hundreds and hundreds of billions of pounds also onshore from shale gas that we should be using. This is our treasure, and we should be using it rather than importing it from overseas, at which time you're also, not only are you deindustrialising our own nation, we're actually creating more CO2 by bringing it from America or wherever. So we've got this great opportunity. We need to change course dramatically. We need to do a complete U-turn, and we need to say to everybody, in particular the oil and gas industry, a reform government will be a government that welcomes investment, welcomes new licences, and we should get ready. We should get ready for those new licences to be granted and approved and to attract investment, equity investment, debt investment. We know it works. We know it's a generator of huge wealth, huge prosperity, and huge opportunity, not just for Aberdeen, but for Scotland. And that's why we're here. And I think that's why, to everybody's surprise, in Holyrood and Westminster, we're doing very, very well here in Scotland. Thank you very much.
Okay, we have a long list of media questions which we are happy to take, starting with James Cook from BBC News.
Thanks very much. Sorry, I was looking for a microphone.
There is one.
There is one. Thank you. Morning, Mr. Farage.
Morning.
These people shouting outside say that you're a racist. Will you reassure them you're not by apologising to the Scottish Labour leader Anas Sarwar for claiming that he would prioritise the Pakistani community when you must know that he literally said no such thing?
Okay, so I can tell you this. We've not heard these sort of chants or tweets in England now for a very, very long time. And indeed, the First Minister, Swinney, was the one that started using this word yesterday in a deliberate, I think, and very, very provocative way. I would remind everybody that the chairman of the party is Scottish-born, but comes from parents who come from the Indian subcontinent. But we don't talk about race at all. We think everybody should be treated equally. We object very strongly to the segmentation of people into different types. And I think, to be frank, that Mr. Sarwar has a record of obsessing on this issue. There was the famous speech that he gave in the Scottish Parliament saying, why are the judiciary white? Why are, these leading figures in Scotland white? A most extraordinary speech, given the statistics and figures here. And actually, I think that speech that he gave was sectarian in its very nature. We are the South Asian community. We are going to take over the country and take over the world.
He didn't say any such thing.
Well, he did actually very, very clearly.
He did not say that the South Asian community would take over the country or the world,
he said,
nor did he use the word prioritise.
He said...
Why can't I hear what you're saying, but why can't you just accept what he literally said and not mischaracterise what he said?
We believe what he said was a form of sectarian politics, and we don't like it one little bit. Thank you very much indeed. Ben Phillip from BBC Scotland.
Obviously, here in Aberdeen today, Nigel, many will be listening to what you're saying about the oil and gas industry. On the slogan, Drill, Scotland, Drill, is it not the case that that will just make oil and gas companies even wealthier? It's not going to lower bills. How will your policies actually help ordinary people?
Jobs, 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 very well-paid jobs, money in people's pockets, which they'll spend in Aberdeen and elsewhere. And, big companies can make big profits. Big companies can make big losses. It works both ways. This idea that a political party either supports the workers or supports the private companies that put risk capital in is absolute nonsense. The two can't coexist without each other. And what is for certain in Scotland and across the wider United Kingdom is the public sector gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and our overall national finances means that we're getting poorer and poorer and poorer. And just look at GDP per capita over the course of the last few years.
I know, but most of the oil and gas that is extracted from the sea just outside is exported. So something will need to change to the wholesale prices to actually bring bills down for people.
That's a very interesting point. Oil tends to trade on a global market at a global price, priced in dollars. The gas market is completely and utterly different. And Richard knows a bit more about what happened in America with gas prices.
Yeah, so funny, isn't it? We're told that gas is an international price. So why is the American price of gas about a third of the UK price? Why are, therefore, their electricity bills about a third to a quarter of our bills? I completely refute your suggestion that being reliant on oil and gas will not bring down bills. We know it will because it did. And there is a direct link between the increase in renewable generating capacity over the last 10 to 15 years and the dramatic increase in electricity prices way above inflation. That is the simple reality. And cheap energy drives everything. It drives investment, it drives businesses, it drives prosperity. And there is a direct link between our high electricity prices and there's just and the renewable generating capacity. And here's the other thing that people won't tell you. The vast, vast majority now, about 2/3 of our electricity price is now policy costs, levies, subsidies, transmission costs, constraint payments, and all of that. The actual wholesale cost is down at somewhere between 30 and 35%. So I'm afraid people are being completely misinformed about the truth.
Yeah, and a political class that have all agreed on everything for year after year after year, and that is why the injection of reform is going to change the whole nature of the debate around economic issues in Scotland. At least I believe that it will and that it should. Christopher McCall, Daily Record.
Hi, Nigel. Back in 2015, during the general election campaign, you said that taxpayers in England were, quote, cheesed off with the amount of public money that goes to Scotland. Can I ask, is that still your view? And if you won power, would you look to scrap the Barnett formula?
Well, the Barnett formula, it seems to me, is really somewhat out of date. What I'd like to see is a Scottish government that's able to raise a bit more of its own revenue and a Scottish economy that has actually got genuine growth. And I don't believe that can happen without this sector booming. All right. And I think, the Barnett formula goes back to the 1970s. Is there an argument it should be looked at again? Of course there is. But, I mean, frankly, if you look at welfare dependency, if you look at educational standards, the idea that sort of 50 billion this year was roughly what the figure's going to be going to Scotland. It isn't going to reduce in the short term until Scotland actually starts to have an economy that is thriving. And right now it's going in completely the wrong direction. Yeah.
Do you support the concept of devolution as the Scottish Parliament?
Oh, yes, devolution's here to stay. And in fact, devolution now is being extended into England, right down to a county basis where we're going to have elected county mayors. No. Devolution is here to stay. Sadly, over the course of the last 20 years or so, devolution doesn't appear to have worked very well. I mentioned education. I could talk about 800,000 plus on the NHS waiting list. It hasn't worked out very well. Doesn't mean devolution's wrong. It means the people running it haven't got it right. Tony Diver, Daily Telegraph.
Farage,
Microphone.
Oh, thank you very much. You said yourself that reform has not been around in Scotland for very long. You said at the last election you ran paper candidates competing in this election. How long is it going to take you to build trust in Scottish people? How long do you think that by this time next year, when Scotland goes to the polls in the Scottish Parliament election, you could win a majority of the Scottish Parliament or even become the second largest party?
Well, I think that if you look at County Durham, where we wiped away the Labour Party on May the 1st, if you look at Staffordshire and Kent, where we erased the Conservative Party, you see we were able in England, with lots of focus and effort, to build a fairly professional, in fact, actually, I'm going to be honest, very professional campaigning team with a good list of vetted candidates. In Scotland, to be frank, Scotland has not had much resource, but some very energetic, good local organisers, some great new people of talent and real-world experience joining us. I don't see any reason why we can't do exactly the same thing here. I accept the SNP have a very, very solid baseline vote. I think the Conservative Party in Scotland will wither away. It frankly serves no purpose. And I think the conditions for the Labour vote in many parts of Scotland are not dissimilar to what we saw in County Durham. So, yeah, I'm very optimistic we can make a big run at the Scottish Parliament next year. We've got a lot more to do. You could say right now the party in Scotland is a movement. It's a teenager, hasn't quite yet reached maturity. Maybe the result on Thursday will be the thing that actually gets us to full adulthood. Thank you very much indeed. Simeon Kerr, Financial Times. Sorry, not here. Okay. Asni Maguire, GB News.
Good morning, all three of you. I'm just curious to know what your take is on the role reversal between what was shy reform and then brash or confident nationalist here in Scotland. Now it's very much the other way around. We're seeing people coming out not afraid to voice their support of reform, while the nationalist conversation, especially around independence, is filtered away a little bit. Just wondered what your take on that and whether that was going to be enough to take you through next year's Holyrood election.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting point you raise. Before a sort of general election last year, you probably wouldn't tell the neighbours you're going to vote reform in case they thought ill of you. If you said, I'm voting reform, it's all like coming out. It was a really big thing for you to do and something that might cause you, a little bit of friction. What I now see, what I've seen in other parts of the UK, and I believe, I already know, that our canvassers are seeing on the streets in Hamilton are people, people are absolutely saying, yeah, we love it. Why are they so vociferous in their support for reform? Because they believe that everything's broken. It was really what you talked about earlier, that things don't actually work anymore. And they see us as the bright new hope that can come in, and because we have the courage of our convictions, we can turn things around. So there is actually a great sense of optimism around our supporters. Many of the media will say it's just a protest vote. It really isn't a protest vote. These voters that are voting reform are not just sticking two fingers up, they are actually... Good morning, everybody. It's good to be here in Aberdeen. And congratulations on beating Celtic last week. No doubt it's been a week of some celebration. Clearly some Aberdeen supporters in the audience. We're very pleased today to be joined by several prominent businessmen and businesswomen who are very, very thoughtful and very, very worried about the future of the oil and gas industry, and indeed all the related businesses and industries that go around that, and perhaps what might happen to the future of Aberdeen and the surrounding area itself. Reform has made remarkable strides in Scotland over the course of the last year. We managed to field candidates for every seat in the general election, but to be honest, it was pretty much a paper exercise. Since then, we've managed to build branches. We've been contesting by-elections every Thursday for councils, wherever they come up. We've had a steadily rising score. We, if you believe the polls over the weekend, are beginning to eclipse Labour to be the second most popular party in Scottish politics. And of course, we have the Hamilton by-election taking place this Thursday. But the purpose of this visit, and I guess it was really the news that Harbour Energy were laying off yet more people, the fact that this industry is in serious decline, and that to a large extent it is wholly unnecessary. These are decisions that we have taken here in our own country. The tax rate, the super tax of 75% that was imposed by the Conservatives in the last period of their 14 years of government, was a disaster for the industry. Labour have only added to that by putting it up to 78% and stopping the application of new licences. Yes, the oil price is low at this moment in time, but after 20 years as a commodity trader, these things do move in cycles. 2025 will be a year of record consumption of fossil fuels. We can con ourselves as much as we like. There'll be more coal burnt this year than has ever been burnt in the history of mankind. And the same applies to the use of gas and oil. Even the most ardent proponent of net zero has to accept the world will still be using oil and gas up until 2050 and beyond. And yet we've decided